Robbie of the Triano clan, the Big 12 is behind the SEC and the Big 10. And Andy Staples makes the case that the SEC Big 10 can kind of cherry pick which teams they want. A couple of you, and then they leave everybody else off the table. The Big 12 kind of goes away to like an NIT realm of college football. How far behind? Because like the Massey ratings would tell us the Big 12 has been the second best conference in college football over the last 4 out of the last 5 years. How far behind is the Big 12 really from these two leagues, especially as we move into this expansion era of college football?
I think when it comes to the top of the league, the Big 12 is far behind. And I think like that is what the SEC and the Big 10 have, is they have those programs that literally carry everybody else so much. And that's why I've made this point on your podcast before. That's why Oklahoma and Texas leaving really sucked. Just because you had those programs that could elevate to that level, like a Michigan to the Big 10 or Ohio State to the Big 10 or an Alabama or an LSU or Georgia. Like those programs elevate everything up so much. So when it comes to being behind in that regard, 100%, I think the Big 12 is very much behind, and you can see it when it comes to recruiting. You can see it when it comes to coaching. We love the coaching here, but I do not think there's a top 5 head coach in the Big 12 in this very moment. And when it comes to funding, they're definitely going to be behind because recruiting money, NIL, everything, those leagues are going to be winning. So where they are behind is that. Where the Big 12 is not behind is everything else but that, because I think that the depth of this league, and you and I have talked about this many times, the depth of this league is incredible. The depth of this league is what makes this league still being in the conversation here. Because if this league was just Oklahoma State, Kansas State, what's going to be Utah and TCU, and then a bunch of crap, this league would not be very good. It would just be a very inflated version of the American. But that's what this Big 12 has right now is, those other schools. That's the major selling point. But I do fear that for the future, as the other conferences have their media deals and they're getting more money and more eyeballs, and the Big 12 is still going to be behind a gap that they already had. That's where I fear for the Big 12, and that's where I feel for the coaches here, because I do think a lot of them will get poached if they do have success here in the Big 12.
Based on 2022 revenue numbers, if this conference was to bring in a Louisville, that's going to boost you up. Louisville 23 overall, according to the NCAA in finances in their athletic department. That's good. And when we talk about moving into the ACC and what they bring, like in North Carolina at 32, if the Big 12 was able to win a school like that, or Virginia Tech at 38, like there are different brands to bring in to close the gap between the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10. Do you think that's where you go next? Now does Brett Yormark just have to add to catch up?
Yeah, I think that has to be the route here. I think we need to just we realize that geography doesn't make any sense whatsoever at all. It just doesn't. And I think that which actually just sucks. And talking about all of this, I realized wow, we're talking about a lot of things that could just make the sport not what we like about it anymore.
It's not fun. Right. 100%.
And that's where I really fear about this sport, is just people are all right, this is way too much change, but also change that I don't like. We lose so much of the regionality here. We lose so much of the rivalries that we cared about. It just seems absolutely silly. And it just seems we love this sport because of the amateur nature of it. And I don't think that NIL and the transfer portal have ruined that. I think realignment has ruined all of what we love about college sports, and how the networks are deciding who cares and who matters and who does. So I hate all of this very, very, very much. But yeah, I think that is the route that the Big 12 needs to have if they want to not only survive, but also compete.
I think Arch Manning would agree with you. We need to keep the amateur aspect of what college football is.
Screw Arch Manning for that. Screw that. He would have been the number one he would have been the player that has been flipped to be the starter out of anybody in all of college football. People would have sent Quinn Ewers to the transfer portal in order to make Arch Manning the starter, and for him to just say, nah, I don't even get the benefit for it. It helps him out with his NIL
focus
money.
On the game, man.
But it's what do you mean focus on? You're not playing the video game. This is what is so stupid. Arch Manning, I don't get it. I think he probably would have been worried if the ratings came out and he's the backup and he was a 78, because everybody's dunking on him you don't have the ratings, and it's that's the only reason why.
The best tweet that I've seen is, as someone who has created a 99 overall quarterback with my own name, I can attest it does distract you between 20 and 30 hours a week. So maybe he just didn't want to play as himself. I don't know. I do know, though, before we get to college basketball, because this is March, that in revenue terms, Maryland's a Big 12 school. Georgia Tech's a Big 12 school. Right? Those are two schools that are below Texas Tech. UCLA even is a Big 12 school. There are brands like Ole Miss and Mississippi State and South Carolina that are right around that category, right? So I'm with you here. I just don't think, sure, that top 20 is, there are no Big 12 teams. But outside of that, you're looking at half the SEC, a good portion of the Big 10 that are just Big 12 schools.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where, like, us as the consumer, we have to decide what we necessarily value. Because I think hardcore college football fans see the Big 12 and it's like every game I know I get something I enjoy. But in terms of the casual, in terms of just like the people who just like want to watch a really good matchup, like, would you rather eat a prime, really good steak, or would you rather eat stew? Like, we love stew. Like, stew is a combination of some of our favorite things, but you necessarily, like, you would rather just have that really, really nice steak, like in Alabama or in Michigan. Like, to the casual person, what is more attractive? Like this seafood stew, like if you talk about The Big Short, like, would you rather have the seafood stew or the seafood soup, or it's like a combination of good things, but on their own it doesn't stand up, or would you rather just have the really good steak? And that's where the Big 12 like has their biggest issue, because they do not have that name brand thing. And I don't know necessarily how they get that name brand thing unless they just have a constant winner. And that's what, like, you and I have talked about this again, and I've said this a lot this episode, but like, the Big 12 just needs a school to win. They need to go in the college football playoff and win and prove it, and don't fall flat on their face and don't lose by 60 points in a national championship game. They need someone who can win and prove that they can do it, and now elevate the rest of the league and make this league respectable. So Oklahoma State, TCU, Utah, Kansas State, anybody else, do that and the league will flourish, and Brett Yormark will just be incredibly happy.
Create a Clemson. Create your own, build your own Clemson. That's where they were 15 years ago. Robbie, that right there, that little like minute and a half, that was really, really good. I'm proud of you.
Oh, cool.
This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every BYU's good at basketball day. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. I go and I drive. Do you drive? Keep your car alive at ebaymotors.com. It's the easiest thing to do in the whole world. Like, literally the world is to go to ebaymotors.com. Passion, drive, and patience brings home the winning trophy. Say that your car is broken. And you're like, oh, my car is broken. eBay Motors will fix it with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. It's the cheapest, easiest, best way to do it, with a guaranteed fit, too. 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Burn rubber, not cash. The prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. ebaymotors.com.